One of the things that I often hear in the hall of the yeshiva is a refrain that, America is our home and God bless America, etc., etc., and that's said often, not necessarily wholly in jest or even partially in jest, but it's sometimes said when we talk about something Zionistic and, Israel is our home. And I'm really glad to have Goel speak to us tonight, because one of the things he's going to touch upon is I think that he felt very much the same way, that he was never going to leave America, and here he is today leading a multinational, very well-known and highly respected PR firm as a senior partner, and I'm very excited to have him share some thoughts with us tonight.
First of all, thank you, Shmuel, for asking me to do this. I would normally say, Bershut Rosh Yeshiva, but it seems like maybe everybody in this room is more qualified to speak than I am. So Bershut to everybody. I appreciate this opportunity, and it's not very often that a guy who didn't go to yeshiva himself has an opportunity to speak to guys in yeshiva, and I want to make sure we make the most of this. Because of that, you can feel free to ask questions along the way. This is not a formal thing where you have to wait till the end. At the same time, you may ask a question that I'll say, I'm going to bring that up later. I'm speaking with you guys with a little bit of trepidation, because some of the things I have to say relate to stories about myself, and I don't want you to think, chas v'shalom, that I somehow think that I'm something special based on these little anecdotes that I'm going to be relating along the way. It just happens that that's what I have to draw upon, is my own experiences. And I'm not Rabbi Frand, or Rabbi Wein, or Rabbi Krohn, who everybody runs up to them all the time telling stories to them so that they can repeat the stories. I'm just Goel Jasper. So all I have really are my own stories. So please forgive me if anything comes off as sounding in any way arrogant. I think probably what's best is for me to just tell you a little bit about myself, who I am, what I do for a living, how I arrived in that kind of career, because you guys really are at sort of a crossroads in everything. You're in the period of your life where you're making the most important decisions of your entire life. Later on you'll decide, which community do I want to live in, what house should I buy. Those are minor. Right now you guys are really trying to figure out who you are, and that's why maybe if I relate who I am and how I've arrived to where I am, maybe that would be of interest to you. Once you have that foundation about who I am, then we'll talk a little bit about what it means to be in public relations, PR. A lot of people say, oh, that's like advertising, right? I suppose in a way it is, but in a way it's much different, and we'll touch on that. And then, of course, the major focus is how can you be in that kind of business and still try to be a good Jew, which is really what life's all about. I've always been a freak when it comes to sports. I heard some people talking about football playoffs. That's a very comfortable place for me. If it included a ball, I was interested. I was one of these guys. I would watch any kind of sport. I was watching ESPN when the only thing on ESPN was Australian rules football and a show called Vic's Vacant Lot. And you guys don't remember Vic's Vacant Lot. Vic's Vacant Lot was hosted by a guy named Vic Braden, who was a former very bad professional tennis player. And this show was so useless that if you look up Vic Braden on Wikipedia, it doesn't even mention the show. That's what ESPN was like in the early days, but that didn't bother me because it was sports. That's how into sports I was. So I went to college and I decided I wanted to be a sports journalist because I wasn't good enough to actually be an athlete, so why not cover the athletes? I worked for the school TV station. I had a weekly call-in show on the school radio station. I majored in journalism. I managed the basketball team. which was an incredible experience, traveling around the country with a Division I basketball team, playing Ohio State, UCLA, Marquette, you name it. And things were heading in the right direction for me. Like, I felt this made sense for me. After college, something interesting happened. I met my wife, or who would become my wife. She was Shomer Shabbat. I was not. I'd always been very Jewish. I always kept kosher. I always fasted on Yom Kippur. I had always been able to be, and maybe you understand what this means, I'd always been able to be comfortable in Orthodox settings, but I wasn't truly comfortable, if that makes any sense. I was not Shomer Shabbos. I wasn't like them. So I was I talked about the crossroads for you guys, I was at a crossroads myself. In that, on the one hand, I really liked this woman I had met, who now is my wife. On the other hand, she was Shomer Shabbat. What was I going to do? So of course the question took about 12 seconds to answer. And 17 years of marriage and 8 children later, we feel like we made the right decision. So I began working on becoming Shomer Shabbat. That was an important thing for me. Obviously, if I wanted to make this thing work. We dated, she began encouraging me. She never pushed me, but she always encouraged me to do the right things. One year on Simchat Torah, we were at Chabad in Wilmington, Delaware. How many of you are from Wilmington, Delaware? Right. Sorry?
It's a shout out Chabad.
Did you say a shout out to Chabad?
Yeah.
Okay.
He does that.
With my mom and stepdad who lived there. And we had, I would call it a transformational experience. The way Chabad does Simchat Torah is very different from the way everyone else does it. Everyone else does, like you do hakafot, and you go around, and everybody's dancing, and and everybody gets a turn with the Sefer Torah, and that's really nice. Chabad does it a little differently. Of course, you have to bid for the right to carry the Sefer Torah, right? But you don't just bid money. You bid money plus. You bid money plus a mitzvah. Chabad, right? So, my mom did the bidding on the money, and then the Rav there said, okay, so, who's going to do the mitzvah? And he looked at me. I said, okay, I'll put tefillin on once a week. That's where I was. I'll put tefillin on once a week. And that's the key to spiritual growth, is a little bit at a time, right? If you take on the whole thing at once, it's like you go really high and then you crash. So that's what I did. I started putting tefillin on once a week, and from there twice a week, and it gets a little silly after a while when you're putting tefillin on 3 times a week, and you're like, nope, I only put it on 3 times a week, and then finally you're like, okay, you know what, I'll just put tefillin on every day. Taking on Shabbat was not as easy, especially for a sports fan like me. In fact, there was a watershed moment in my life. This was 1995. Now, the New York Yankees, I happen to be a big fan of the New York Yankees. The New York Yankees hadn't been to the playoffs since 1982. 1995 comes along, and they finally make it into the playoffs as the wild card, and they play Seattle in the first round. Yeah? Seattle? Okay.
No, Yankees.
Oh, Yankees.
No, they
Okay.
lost.
Not that year, though.
I know.
To make a long story short, Game 5, it was a 5-game series, right? It went to full 5. Game 5, 1995, was the first night of Sukkot. So I was at my mom's, and I was like, I haven't seen the Yankees make it or break it playoff game in 13 years. But I was like, no, I can't watch it because I'm becoming Shomer Shabbat. And the next morning, the newspaper arrived, and the Yankees had lost. And I said to myself, all right, not so bad. The Yankees lost. You didn't watch. Good for you. It was a special thing, and it really was. There have been a bunch of little milestones along the way. It was a big deal for me. But the truth is, that decision was child's play compared to the conversation I had with my boss a couple weeks later. I had already started my career in PR, and I worked for one of the biggest companies in the world, much bigger than the one I work for now, which is also one of the larger ones in the world. I worked with Dunkin' Donuts, I worked with Mazda, I worked with American Express, Frito-Lay, Pepsi, you name it, this company represented them. I worked tremendously hard. I worked on Shabbat. I worked, all the time, and I really built up, even though I was very young, I built up a strong reputation for myself as someone who was willing to do anything at any time to help any client. I dressed up as an avocado and I did the weather report on the Today Show. I dressed up like a turkey and I was the grand marshal for some weird Thanksgiving Day parade. Like anything they needed done, I would do. So when I went to my boss and I said, from now on, I'm going to need to leave early every Friday for several months because I can't be here after the sun goes down. So I need to leave early. She said to me, maybe PR isn't the career for you then. Now, I would have found this devastating, except for one thing. Her boss, and this woman was tough on me. I mean, I worked so hard at one point that I wound up fainting in the office and they took me to the hospital and she walked around proud that she had done that to me. Like, this is like classic, like tough driving boss. But anyway, her boss, who was one of the top 2 or 3 people in the agency, she overheard the conversation. She jumped out of her office and she said, is there something going on here? And my boss explained that I had just requested to leave early every Friday. So her boss said, what are we talking about? You're going to leave a couple of hours early every Friday for a few months? I don't think there's a problem with that. And from then on, everyone knew that Glenn is my slave name, right? Back in the old country on the plantation, that was the name I used. But everybody knew that Glenn left early on Fridays during the late fall, winter, early spring. So I guess at this point you could say I was Shomer Shabbat. But I was still a long way from being in the business world who I was outside of the business world. What I mean is, I still didn't wear a kippah in the office. I mean, I wouldn't wear a kippah in the office, even though everyone knew that I was Jewish, even though everyone knew I was leaving early on Fridays. For some reason, there was something about wearing this. And there's a little bit of an interesting story about this. After my first 2 PR jobs, one at the agency that I had mentioned, and then another agency after that, I went and joined a .com. This is one of these high-flying .coms in the late 90s. We raised $86 million and spent a lot of it, right? I mean, this is when the .com age was in its heyday. We did amazing things. Time Magazine wrote about us. The Wall Street Journal wrote about us. The New York Times wrote about us. I mean, everyone wrote about this company, and life was really good. I was married, had a couple kids at that point. Everything's fine. And then one day, the head of partnerships for our company came over to my office and introduced me to a potential partner for the company from Hong Kong, who happened to have been wearing a kippah on his head. And she introduces me to him, and he says, I understand you're Orthodox? And I said, yeah. He said, this is in front of her. He said, where's your kippah? I said, I have it. I keep it in my bag while I'm at work. It's there. It's there. He said, put it on your head. I said, no, I don't want to put it on my head. I have it. I wear it. I don't wear it in the office. It's very good. He said, put it on your head. I said, listen, I get it. I understand what you're trying to do. He said, no. I'm not leaving until you put it on your head. So I took it out of my bag, and I put it on my head for 5 seconds, and then I took it off. And it was such an uncomfortable moment. She walks away. He stays there to talk to me a little bit. I was curious about the Hong Kong Jewish community. Back then, I didn't know there was a Jewish community in Hong Kong. As it turns out, there's unfortunately a thriving, wealthy Jewish community in Hong Kong. I say unfortunately because these are people who basically are soaking up the galut and enjoying the galut as if it doesn't get any better than that. But that's not really the topic of this conversation. He said, do you really think they don't look at you differently? they know that you're Jewish. They know that anytime there's food ordered, you order from a different place. I was like an executive of this company. They know that you leave every Friday early. They know for Jewish holidays you're nowhere to be found. They know they can't reach you on Saturday. And you think wearing a kippah is like the difference maker? You think that like somehow you are one of them because you don't wear a kippah in the office? So it gave me a lot to think about. I went home that day, and I came in the next day, and I went to my boss. My boss was the number 2 guy in the company, Sean Lane, wonderful guy. Still remember. So I went into his office, and I said, Sean, I'd like to start wearing a yarmulke in my office. Is that okay with you? He said, I don't understand. He said, it's fine with me, but like, it's not like on the way into the office every day you have a kippah on your head and then you get to the building and you take it off and you're in the office all day and then when you leave the office you put it back on. And I said, actually, Sean, that is what I do. And he said, oh gosh, like he was devastated. He said, if you can't be yourself around the people you're working with, you probably shouldn't be working with them. You need to feel comfortable with who you are. And from that day on, and I promise you guys this, from that day on, every single business decision I've made based on who I am and not based on what is expected in the workplace. When other people were shaving during Sfirat HaOmer, I was not. When other people were eating salads at non-kosher restaurants during meetings, I had a Coke. And that's not to say that those people were wrong, right? If you're someone who doesn't want to shave during, who wants to shave during Sfirat HaOmer, there's a HaTorah for that, no problem. If you're someone who wants to eat a salad, there's a way to eat a salad at a non-kosher restaurant. Okay, I understand. But I was not willing to make those kinds of compromises anymore. But the truth is, those were surface. Like those things I did, those were window dressing. Because we all know that the way you look on the outside is not necessarily representative of who you are on the inside. Which takes us to the final step in my career religious journey. At this time, and I guess it's about 2001, I'd become more and more Torah-oriented in how I was, which is a distinction from being Orthodox, right? Torah-oriented versus Orthodox. We'll talk about that a little more later. We were, at the time, living in Baltimore. We love Baltimore. Baltimore. Anybody here from Baltimore? No.
I'm the closest.
Sorry?
I'm the closest.
Which is?
Silver Spring.
Close in distance. Not close in terms of
No.
overall community. I was loving it. Going to Rabbi Fran's shiur every week. You know, like this guy who has all these tapes and everything. Like I was there every week, and just a wonderful, wonderful community. Anyway, one week Rabbi Fran was talking about arrogance and self-promotion, about how that's not the way we want to be. And he said words that just like I don't know how to describe it. It was like on the one hand it like knocked me backwards. On the other hand it like dug into my heart. I was like sick to my stomach. He said, this is a paraphrase just in case someday someone should like watch this and say, Rabbi Fran, did you really say this? This is a paraphrase. He said, there's even a career called PR where people spend their lives promoting things and often promoting themselves. And I was like my whole career is like this like against the Torah career. And I mean, I built it up to that point. Like I was like having some success in this whole PR thing. So I mean, it blew my mind. And I didn't think of myself as arrogant. I didn't think of myself as self-promotional. And in fact, those are the kinds of things that like have always rubbed me the wrong way. I don't like self-promoters. I don't like people who who aren't able to step outside themselves and see how they look to other people when they behave in a certain way. Sorry? Those just aren't Jewish traits, arrogance, self-promotion, those kinds of things. For example, what's more powerful in terms of prayer? 3 Roshei Yeshiva sitting in a room davening, or 10 non-observant Jews? Well, 10 non-observant Jews, right? They can make a minyan, which has a heck of a lot more power than 3 individuals davening. When you think about Moshe Rabbeinu, what's the trait that stands out most? Is humility, right? So here I was, Mr. Promoter, and it's like, wait a second. So this comment from Rav Frand stayed in my mind for years, but I didn't do anything about it because I had a successful career, and they always say, Parnassah is very important, and you have to make sure that you keep it. But then about 3 years ago, I was listening to another shiur. This one was Rav Ari Khan. Rav Ari Khan also has a lot of tapes on the internet and everything. He's very different hashkafically from Rav Frand, but Rav Khan, in his own right, certainly knows his stuff. I recommend him highly, actually. RabbiAriKhan.com. He was giving a shiur on Adam and Chava on Bereshit, the first parsha. And of course, we all know the story that Hashem tells them they can't eat from the tree, right? Not the tree of knowledge, but the tree of knowledge between good and evil, right? You all know the distinction. What fruit was it? What fruit was it?
Etrog, some people say.
Etrog, maybe? Okay, what else?
Some people say pomegranate.
Pomegranate.
Wheat.
Wheat. Grapes, not an apple. Right? We all know, not an apple. That is a Christian creation. Okay? But that's an aside. So anyway, so they understand they can't eat from this tree. But the snake, the Nachash, has different ideas. And there's a lot in how the snake behaves. That's also for a different time. But in any case, he convinces Chava to eat the fruit. So in his explanation of that parsha, Rav Khan says the Nachash was the world's first PR person. I was like, come on. I don't understand. I am not a snake. It's not the way I behave. So now I've got Rav Frand and Rav Khan both slamming my profession. And meanwhile, the whole way through, I've been trying to do things the right way. So I sought advice. I sought advice from a couple of people. First, I sought advice from Rabbi Dov Littman, who I understand spoke here a little while ago. He's a good friend of mine, Silver Spring. And he knows a thing or two about challenges in a career that doesn't seem to fit well with Torah observance. He was also a great high school point guard in his day. I don't know if you guys realize that. Very quick. He was like John Stockton. He was very, very, very good with the ball. Anyway, I explained my challenge, and that it seems that my career basically, by definition, butts heads with Torah observance. So he told me that issue was never a concern for him, but we live our life as we're supposed to live it, and we have the careers we're destined to have. But he also suggested I speak with one other person, Rav Yitzhak Breitowitz from Or Sameach, Silver Spring. Rav Breitowitz is a unique individual. Any of you know Rav Breitowitz? Okay, Rav Breitowitz, he has smicha from Ner Yisrael, and he has a Harvard law degree. Just your average guy, right? I figured if anyone knows how to reconcile religiosity with career, he would probably be a good guy. So I contacted him, and I eventually met with him, and he basically said, life is all about being a Kiddush Hashem. That's what we want to do. We want to demonstrate to the world that we are clear on the right way to do things and what the Torah dictates, and no matter what you're doing, if you can do it with through that lens, then you're fine. And he even went further. He said the truth is, doctors save lives, but in terms of impact on the world, someone who's doing work in a profession that's traditionally not seen as a positive profession, and they're doing it in in a Torah-oriented way could be helping the world just as much. So I went on my merry way, thinking that okay, I guess I can continue on, and that it is possible to have a career in an industry known for misleading, lying, sugarcoating, self-promoting, all of which are asur midoraita. But the question is how, right? Given the fact that all that stuff is asur, how can you have that kind of career? How can I be successful when everyone around me is playing by the rules, which are against Torah rules, right? That were set in this industry, an industry that's known for these kinds of things. If you don't bring those things to the table, you're not going to be able to do as well. So the answer is simple. I don't do as well. I leave money on the table. I leave money on the table all the time. I know for a fact that certain companies will not work with me because I have a kippah on my head. So I don't get them as clients. It's that simple. I was up for a top job with a top company, a couple of years ago, with a salary that was so high that it would have transformed our financial existence for years to come. Then, and I was like the front runner. This is what they told me. Then I had a Skype call with the decision maker, and suddenly I stopped hearing from them. That's not to say that it's because of the kippah, but just because you're paranoid doesn't mean they're not out to get you, right? The next item I'm going to mention as an example is a little embarrassing, but it's such a strong. I feel it makes such a strong point that it's worth mentioning, and it may seem like it's sort of coming out of left field a little bit, and I apologize for that. But I don't consider myself to be a terribly good-looking person. No better looking than anybody else. But when we arrived in Israel 9 years ago, actually, according to the secular calendar, 9 years ago today, so I guess I deserve Mazal Tov. It seemed that women in the Israeli business world saw something in me. I don't know what it was, but it was very uncomfortable. They were flirting with me all the time. It was not good. So what I decided to do was I decided to grow a beard. I grew a beard because I knew that ostensibly I would be less attractive and sort of more like frummy looking if I had a beard and a kippah versus a kippah without a beard. And so, I did that because I felt that was best for me. And at the same time, I knew that by having a big black kippah on my head and a beard, that's not exactly a great new business getter in the high-tech world of Israel. A lot of these guys don't have any hair. They shave their heads, And here I am, I walk in the room with a beard and a black kippah. But that's fine. I knew I would lose business as a result. When we were planning our aliyah, I decided to grow peot it was like a celebration, basically. I said, I'm going to grow peot because I'm moving to the Jewish country, and so I can have them, so I'm going to grow them. And I know that the combination of a big black kippah and a beard and peot, shall we say, is not in and of itself going to help win any business in the high-tech world here. But this is who I am. Now the cool thing is that even though I am leaving all that money on the table, sometimes having this approach works in my favor. A crazy thing happened to me. This was about 3 years ago, and I was up for a salary review. So my bosses in New York said, tell us what you have in mind. I told them what I had in mind, and they miscalculated the exchange rate. So when we had our discussion, after I'd emailed them the amount that I was interested in, they miscalculated so incorrectly that when we had the conversation, they said, we know you're asking for X, which, by the way, was like $40,000 more than what I wanted. But we can only give you X minus 20, right? Which was 20 more than what I wanted. So I said to them, I think you made a mistake in your calculations. I was actually only asking for X, or X minus 40, I guess is what it would be. I'm only asking for X minus 40, so if it's okay with you, I'm just going to take that. They couldn't believe it. But what happened as a result of that is, okay, number one, I got the salary I wanted, which was very nice, but what was particularly cool is that what I lost in financial gain, I more than made up for in credibility for the rest of my tenure with that company, which I'm still working for today. So what I'm saying is that sometimes taking this approach helps in Olam Hazeh also. It's not just Olam Haba. But for sure, there are many times when having this Torah orientation hurts my business. I know I can get away with charging more at certain times when an ignorant potential client comes knocking on the door. I know that the results of our initiatives, very much of our business is securing results with the media, like getting an article in the New York Times, getting an article in the Wall Street Journal. That's what we get paid to do. And sometimes the results are better than others. So I know there are certain times when I can make the results look better than they actually are to the client, and he will be fine with how I sugarcoat them. But I'm not going to do that. And there are also times I can justify not giving an employee a salary increase because maybe the company's not doing as well, but I don't do that because that's not the way a Torah-oriented person behaves. And the reason why I don't do that is because if I do that once, then I am the Nachash. It's that simple. I'm just another arrogant, self-promotional PR person that Rabbi Friend was talking about many years ago. Now, I've been using this term Torah-oriented, but I haven't yet defined it. Anybody want to take a shot at what Torah-oriented means? Raise your hand, please.
Torah-oriented.
Raise your hand.
Okay.
Go ahead.
I thought this was
What's your name?
Thought this was a casual thing. Not formal.
I really like your hat.
Got one.
What's your
Got
name?
one person. Thank you.
Max.
Max.
Where are you from?
New Jersey.
Okay.
You mean by Torah-oriented versus Orthodox? You were Torah-oriented in that the way you went about things and your mindset and your actions were Torah-based versus just you do like Torah things, but everything you were was Torah mitzvah.
Okay. I mean, that not bad. The truth is, it's not everything I am, right? I still watch the St. Joe's Hawks play college basketball.
Yeah, but like the way you go about things versus
good.
just doing certain things.
Very good. Yes, your name? Your name?
Yaakov.
From?
New York.
Okay, go ahead, Yaakov.
Shout out New York. No, but I think Orthodox is more like a perception. Like people think if you're Orthodox, you have to do everything a certain way. The Torah-oriented is you can do maybe even PR just if you have the right length, like you said.
Okay, good. Yes. Name?
David.
From?
Virginia.
Which part?
Richmond.
I like Richmond. I've been to Richmond a couple of times.
Oh yeah?
Yeah. Go ahead.
So it's maybe by Torah that the way you approach things is that you come from it from a Torah-oriented perspective first before you approach it from a secular standpoint.
Good. Good. Very good.
All right.
Everything you guys have said has been very good.
Very good.
Any other thoughts before I give my definition? My definition is not necessarily right, by the way. It's just it's the right definition for me, right? I define it as looking at everything, looking at everything that you do, think, and say through the lens of Torah. You guys hit on a lot of that. Looking at everything you do, think, and say through the lens of Torah. And that's not to say I don't make mistakes and that I don't mess up big time sometimes. I do. There have been times when I've had the opportunity to go to a Yom Iyun, learning Torah all day, and instead the Eagles were playing a playoff game. This was back in Baltimore. The Eagles were playing a big playoff game, and I was like, how can I miss this playoff game? And of course the Eagles lost, and I lost out on the Torah, right? I mean, we make mistakes. But what I try to do is every decision I make, I try to make it in the context of a life driven by Torah. Now, based on my story, you might think that I grew up reform or conservative, and the truth is, it's not true. I grew up in a house that was Orthodox. We didn't go to shul very often, but when we went to an Orthodox shul. I didn't travel in a car on Shabbat until my sophomore year of college. Then I did. But I watched a lot of TV on Shabbat growing up. But we kept the TV on, right? Like somehow that was okay because we kept it on. We ate at non-kosher restaurants, but we only had like tuna or like spaghetti with meatless sauce. We had our own sort of version of what Orthodoxy was. We always had Shabbat dinner. We always had Shabbat lunch. We didn't discuss Torah at all. Had someone started a zemer during a Shabbat meal, everyone else would have thought he was joking. Like that's what it was. We had really good food, you know. We were I guess we were another phrase that I've coined called we were casual Orthodox. We were casual Orthodox. Orthodox philosophically, but you know, sort of casual about the whole thing. Now, don't get me wrong. If casual Orthodox works for someone, that's a heck of a lot better than nothing. I mean, it's a heck of a lot better than lots of things, right? But it didn't work for me because it seemed like we were always like wrapping our Judaism around our non-Jewish lives. Like we're non-Jews with little Jews sprinkled on top, right? That's who we were. Chas v'shalom. I mentioned early on that everything changed when I met my wife Gila. One of the things that changed was my understanding of what Torah observance could be. Shabbat in her family was not the day you couldn't do anything. Shabbat was the day that you could relax and enjoy people around you. Yom Kippur wasn't the day that you couldn't eat or drink. It was the day when you had all day to figure out exactly where you stood with HaKadosh Baruch Hu and the ability to set the proper course for the following year. To me, being casual Orthodox was all about restricting things I couldn't do. Being Torah-oriented is much more about how Judaism enables us to achieve. Who puts his right shoe on first in the morning? Raise your hand. Do you know how incredible it is that we can fulfill a halacha by putting our right shoe on first in the morning? Who has filtered internet at home? Raise your hand.
At home?
I don't care. Anywhere. Who has filtered internet at home?
Yeah.
You know how amazing it is that I can protect my kids and their Torah orientation just by putting a filter on my internet? So I look at my career in PR, and I think to myself, what an incredible gift it is to be able to do PR in a way that is consistent with Torah and what the Torah requires of us. I don't see it as a negative. I don't see it as a workaround. I see it as this is the way PR is supposed to be done for a Jew. And yeah, as a result, I leave some money on the table. Just last week, someone contacted me, ready to pay me a lot of money, not me, my company, right? Ready to pay my company a lot of money to help him remove his client's negative information from Google search results, right? I said, no thanks, not interested. Don't want to help to minimize the negativity if there's negativity there. But I'm not alone, by the way. I know of someone else who was contacted by a potential client, someone else in my industry, who was contacted by a potential client who said, I have $100,000 I want to spend with you on a campaign designed to help the Jewish people keep our land. And this colleague said, listen, I've gone down this road with others in the past. There are so many people who think they have the solution to the whole Israel-Palestinian conflict, and they've all wasted their money. Let's do this. Give me a few $1,000s. Let's do some research together, understand what hasn't worked in the past, and then if you decide after that that you want to move forward, I'll gladly take your money. So it's not just me, but that's an incredible Kiddush Hashem that guy did. But even if I were the only one doing this, and I'm not, because I have 7 other people in my office who have the same orientation. I mean, they all might think I'm a little crazy, but generally, I won't hire anybody unless they do things properly. But even if I were the only one, I have the Torah on my side, and I truly believe that HaKadosh Baruch Hu will not allow me to fail long term if I'm trying to do things according to the Torah. So I guess my bracha for all of you is I wish you all Torah-oriented lives, focused on doing, thinking, and saying everything according to what the Torah dictates, and I promise you it'll work in your favor. I'm going to just speak a minute about Aliyah, because I do believe that that factors into this, and then I'll take any questions you might have. Very simply, I look at living in the land of Israel as the same way a lot of other people would look at investing. There are two companies for the Jewish people these days. There's a company where the stock price is eventually going to tank, and there's a company where the stock price eventually is going to go up. So my family decided to invest in the future. Our kids are smiling, they're very happy, and it's a wonderful turning life on its head to think that you can raise your children in a place where Jews are the majority. It's just mind-blowing that we have that opportunity in our generation, and my family didn't want to pass that up. The rest of our family, my wife's family and my family, they're all in the States, leading wonderful lives, there's certainly something to be said for that, but for us, this is the place for the future of the Jewish people. Thank you very, very much for listening to me.
Thank you very much.
Any questions? Your name?
Avi.
From?
Detroit. So this is coming from complete ignorance of what PR is, but if you don't use any methods of like misleading or sugarcoating, so what exactly is your skill in PR? Because I assume the skill of PR is how misleading you can be and still sound legit.
Yes,
So
a lot of people assume that.
What is your skill exactly? What is PR?
The skill, I'll answer the question and then I'll go into it a little further. The skill is understanding how to identify an interesting story and how to position the story so that it'll be interesting to other people. If you work for a company that has a garbagey story, then you have two choices. You can either not get anyone interested in covering your company, or you can mislead. Our choice is to not work with such companies. We want to work with companies that have an interesting story to tell, so that we will be able to do things not just in an honest way, but in a candid way. In other words, communicating all the information about the company so that the reporters have the correct story. You're absolutely right, Avi, that in many cases you have garbagey companies with garbagey stories, and because they don't have a great story, they just create something that's not true. We worked with one company for about 12 minutes because it became clear we did not want to work with them, and we suggested to them that they announce a certain milestone. They had sold 10,000 of something. And the CEO said, "Why don't we announce 20,000?" I said, "Wow, that's great. You've sold 20,000?" He said, "No, we haven't even sold 10,000." I was like, "I think we're going to stop working with you." There was someone else who was willing to do that. But you don't have to do that, and you just have to make sure that you choose the right companies to work with.
And also, what do you consider misleading? Because I know Coca-Cola is a great company, but I'm sure in the advertisements they have methods to, I don't know, get people to, even though I don't know if that's considered misleading, or
Right.
you just say Coke tastes good. Or something.
So advertising is a little different. What's interesting about advertising is that they actually have very severe requirements on how they're able to describe things. They actually don't do the misleading. It's actually you who accepts what they have to say. If they're gonna have, let's not take Coke, but let's take a sneaker company, right? If a sneaker company is gonna have LeBron James in its commercials, and LeBron James is gonna do a 360 dunk and then smile at the camera, and you're gonna say, "Wow, I want those shoes." It's not the shoe company that's done something wrong. It's you for accepting that. But that's okay because that's human nature. I mean, we all are impacted by marketing. I always refer to my wife as as a marketer's dream, because when she'll walk into a store and something will be packaged so nicely, and it's like there's no way she's going to leave the store without wanting to buy that thing. So it's us. It's not the advertisers.
Yeah, but they know. They take
Hand,
advantage
please.
of that,
Hand, please.
though. Sorry.
Yes.
They take advantage of that, though.
Yes. They make the most of it.
Okay.
Let's say it that way. They make the most of it. Yeah. You got a question?
First question, I was curious, well, you said that you came from like a casual Orthodox home, so I'm not sure how much the transition was, but how'd your family react to this whole bit and moving to Israel and whatnot?
Okay, so hold on a second. We have
Yeah, they're
a
weird.
wardrobe malfunction here.
They're weird ones. Sorry about this.
Okay, so here's the story with that. And I'll divide it in two. There's the Torah observance piece, and there's the moving to Israel piece. The Torah observance piece, they were fine with because remember, they understood conceptually that that they took a more casual approach than other people. But to this day, they challenge me. They challenge me.
In what way, guys?
For example, they test me to see if the midot that we have as a family are consistent with what they want from us in terms of midot versus just the letter of the law. So, for example, use of a thermometer on Shabbos, right, to take a kid's temperature. So my father is of the opinion that you can use even an electric thermometer, because it's for the sake of someone's health. And so he asked me one time, you would, for the sake of my grandchildren, you would use any kind of thermometer, right? I said, well, actually, Dad, no, I would use a regular thermometer, and there's an issue with an electric thermometer unless it's like absolutely necessary. He said, but you're not a doctor, so you don't know what's absolutely necessary. So those kinds of things, which is just challenging us. But the thing that sort of overtakes all of that challenge is he sees that we're happy. He sees that our kids are happy. He sees that our kids love him very much. They give him big hugs when they see him. So there's no sort of intimidation factor. I think that oftentimes when children are more Torah oriented than their parents, there's a concern that their parents are going to be sort of left behind. As someone whose family, both my family and my wife's family, are still in the States, I can tell you that the value of family is so much higher in our eyes now than it used to be, because we realize that it's there's nothing like it in the world, which I guess leads to the answer about Aliyah. My parents were sad about our Aliyah, but they were proud that we were doing this. I grew up in a Zionistic house, whatever that means. I'm not even sure what Zionism is, but that's for someone else to speak with you guys about. We grew up in a house that appreciated the fact that we had the state of Israel. Let's just leave it at that. So my parents were and are both proud of the fact that we live here. My father even went as far as to, anytime he talks to someone he knows about it, he says, this is what the Torah says you should do. So of course this is where they live. That's the conclusion you have to draw if you read the Torah. My wife's parents were, my wife's father is actually an Israeli himself. So he was totally at peace with the whole thing. He just loved it, and still loves it. My wife's mother, Zichronah Livracha, who died about 3 years ago, she was angry. She was angry, and then it took a couple of visits for her to say, "Wow, now I understand why you guys are doing this," and then she was completely at peace. But none of these crazy things like that they wouldn't see us off at the airport that you hear and those kinds of things. Generally supportive.
Menachem.
From?
Most recently in California. What would you say is the biggest challenge of all the challenges that you face on a day-to-day basis in your workplace that you have to catch yourself or say to yourself, is this something that I really want to is this something that I really think is true to the letter of the law, or is there some wiggle room? I don't know, how often does that moment come into play where you think, okay, it's strict letter of the law, it's okay, but it's not ideal type of.
Yes. Remember I said earlier that I make some mistakes?
Yeah.
There are times when and let's be honest, in life, the biggest barrier to success is rationalization, right? So there are times when I rationalize. Frankly, I just did it last week. We have an employee who's leaving the company. She has a couple clients, and I waited before telling the clients. I didn't tell them right away because I said to myself, you know what? It's not going to change anything in terms of the service they receive. I will tell them the truth. I just need a few more days to make sure that the rest of the team is in the right place so that I can present to them a strong team. That's a case where I did the wrong thing. I made a mistake. Now they're going to see this on the internet. They're all going to fire me. But I think it's those kinds of decisions when you can claim ethics. You can say, I can explain this as being ethical, but deep down you could have done it in a better way. Yes.
Sam.
Silver Spring.
You had mentioned before that you were very rooted and wanted to stay there. What was the big push where you finally made the closing decision? We're coming to Eretz Yisrael, and that's it.
Okay, so my wife wanted to make Aliyah when she was much younger. When she was here studying after high school. No, actually, she came here after college. She came here after college, and she studied at a place called Neve Yerushalayim. I don't know if you ever heard of it. Certainly, some of the older people in the room have heard of it. She sent a letter to her parents and said, "I'm making Aliyah. It just might take 10 years, but I'm making Aliyah." So we made Aliyah with 5 kids 10 years after that, which is interesting. So she always wanted to make Aliyah.
Had to keep her promise.
She still has the letter, by the way. It's very cool. I was a much tougher nut to crack. The first time I came here, I was 26 years old, and we already had a baby, Ezra, our Bechor, and we were walking down the street one day. I was with my father-in-law. Gila's parents came with us on this trip, and we were walking down the street toward Machane Yehuda, and he said to me, "Isn't it so nice to be walking on the street in your country?" And I said, "It's very nice here, but the United States is my country." I was nowhere near making Aliyah. So that was when I was 26. When I was 31 was, when was 9/11?
9/11?
2001. So I was 30. I wasn't even 30. I was 29. I came to Israel right after that, because we were living in Baltimore. I came to Israel on one of these missions with our Beit Knesset in Baltimore. There were 20 of us who came with the Rav. And these trips that Federation will bring a group to Israel and they won't go outside the Green Line. Well, we didn't go inside the Green Line. We spent all of our time on Yeshuvim, on the settlements, trying to just strengthen the people living on the settlements. Of course, as it always happens, they wind up strengthening you. I saw these. We were in Rechelim. I'm guessing no one's heard of Rechelim. Okay, Rechelim was the last settlement approved before this whole Mishigas began. We were there, and I saw these 8 kids in a caravan that was their school. It was these 8 little kids, and there was this one boy with this big, settler kippah, big knit job, right? And he had these beautiful eyes, and I said to myself, my kids are on the sideline of Jewish history. This is Jewish history playing itself out, and I'm in Baltimore. And so I called my wife, and I said, "Gila, we have to talk. We have to move to Israel." She thought I was drunk or something. I was so not there. But when you become a parent, we're still a few years away from this, guys. But when you become a parent, everything changes, right? Everything changes in terms of your perspective. It's no longer about what makes sense for you. It's about what makes sense for your kids. And living in Israel is what made sense right at that moment when I saw that boy in that caravan. Other questions? Max.
This is more just like a law, like PR kind of thing. I don't know if this has to do with what you do, but Hashkafa's on. I don't know what companies you work with. Does PR work with food also?
Yeah.
So Hashkafa's on food. Or just
Hashkafas, maybe?
Hashkafa's, I'm sorry.
Okay.
Not the way of thinking. So,
I mean, I like food very much. I have my hashkafa about food.
Me too.
Go ahead.
Me too. But the hashkafa, do you work with that at all, or
I generally don't work with food,
no?
particularly being in Israel. Back in the day, I did. As I mentioned, I was an avocado on the Today Show.
Fair enough.
And
a turkey on the.
But you're not necessarily asking a question I can answer.
No, I'm
like, would I represent a food that's not kosher?
No, that's not my question here. I'm saying, although that's a question also, but whatever. So I'm specifically asking by the law of like these things. I'm not sure. Like people like say like, oh, Kellogg's has a K, but it's not really, or something like that, and these different things. Is that legit, or like is the K real? Or?
Okay, that is beyond my general understanding.
No, all right.
I do accept the K on Kellogg's.
I think it's Kellogg's.
But that's like an aside. I'm not going to answer those kinds of questions.
All right, sorry about that. I was just curious.
You got some guys in white shirts who can answer those questions.
Fair enough. But I also wanted to know, how did you, the turkey, you were in the turkey on like the Macy's Day Parade?
Not the Macy's Day. I don't know.
Okay,
so there's a TV station called FX. Does it still exist?
Yeah.
Okay, so FX, they used to have a morning show of their own back in the early days of FX. And I don't remember what it was called. Like, I don't have a Facebook page. I don't go to the websites that, we don't have a TV. I don't go to the websites that talk about entertainment. It's not of interest to me, so I don't know about it. I know about the Amazing Rabbis.
Oh yeah.
That's really cool.
I don't know, what is that?
There are these guys on one of these reality shows in Israel, one of these music shows, and they're two Breslov Hasidim.
Oh,
what?
those are amazing.
Yeah,
And they're incredible. They're
what do they
really,
do?
really nice voices.
What do they do?
They're singers.
Oh, I saw that.
So, I know that kind of stuff. So I know apparently Miley Cyrus like went off the derech. That's what I heard. I don't know anything else. I don't know anything else beyond that. I'm sorry. I don't know anything else beyond that. I do know that there's a long track record of entertainers doing whatever it takes to remain in the public eye.
And I just want to know from a PR perspective what you thought about that.
Apparently it was a success.
No, I think he's asking that idea of what it grabs everybody to see somebody going,
Yeah, is that effective in the long term? What is that?
Is it effective? Okay, so now you're asking me a different question. Is it effective in the long term? The only way we know that is 20 years from now. Is it effective? I imagine it provided some kind of boost, but she was pretty big time, right? Already, right?
Yeah,
so,
she was kind of a relative.
Well, she used to be.
She was a relative for a while. Okay, again, not my area, so I'm not clear. I am a big fan of doing shocking stunts.
Yeah.
In PR. What's that?
You've done some in your past.
Yeah, but the point is that if you're going to do something, then it has to have a strategic component to it. We used to always talk about if Baskin Robbins, which I really miss by the way, if Baskin Robbins were to have the world's biggest ice cream cake in the middle of Central Park one day during the summer, that would get a lot of attention, but it would be a horrible mess, and I mean it could turn into a disaster for them. So is that a great idea? Maybe not. So shocking things always have to have a strategic component to them as well.
Does that really work? That people with billboards and stuff like that, and people do these big things. Like when I see a company, I don't know if you deal with billboards also. Is that part of PR?
No, that's advertising. But to answer your question, it obviously works because companies spend hundreds of millions of dollars.
I understand that, but when I see these things, I think oh wow, it's something cool that they did, but it doesn't necessarily make me want to go and purchase that.
Right. So you're a different kind of consumer. For you, it might be you hear something about a product from a friend on Twitter, and that's what's going to do it for you.
Fair enough.
Yeah, no, I just wanted to ask. Red Bull had been doing for the last, I'd say.
Gosh, I should have done my homework.
5 to 10 years. But recently, really, in the last 5 years, they've been heavy on stunts. I mean, they had a guy drop from space. That was all sponsored by Red Bull. But they obviously continue to do it because it's working. Otherwise.
Yeah, it's listen. I mean, you guys have seen the Super Bowl, right? Like, so you understand that it's universally accepted that advertising works. The big question in today's age of social media is, do companies have to spend the kind of money they traditionally spent in order to make the impact that they want to have? And that's a different kind of discussion probably for a business school class. And I'm not a professor, but it's a good point.
So, for example, if a company messed up or had a bad run of something or whatever it was, that would be something they'd say, oh, we need a PR firm to clean up our mess. So is that the difference between advertising and public relations? Sounds more on the putting on the good spin type of...
Right, see, the interesting thing is that that very often if a company does something bad, advertising will be just as important a component as PR, but it may be the PR company or the PR executive who's making the decisions. But the traditional difference between advertising and PR is managing a company's reputation in terms of message and story development, whereas advertising is once that message is clear, how do you push out that message in paid media?
I'm just curious, over your career, where did you fit in, especially because you had this boss that wasn't so helpful about it, davening and learning? Like,
great question. Great question. I don't know how much time we have, but
keep on. Long as you want.
That's a great question, and I'm sorry I didn't bring that up. Davening and learning have been uneven for me throughout my career, throughout my married life. I'm currently, Baruch Hashem, in a pretty good place. Not that I haven't davened and that I haven't learned, but sometimes, again, this whole rationalization thing, you're able to rationalize things away, and sometimes it's a correct rationalization. For example, when we had a lot of babies in the house, and at one point we had 3 kids in diapers at the same time, you say to yourself, is my time better spent going to Minyan or helping my wife at home with the kids? Never mind the fact that if I would just wake up an hour earlier, there was an earlier Minyan I could have gone to when everyone else in the house is still sleeping, but you rationalize these things. And the same goes for learning. So where I am now is, and really that's what life is all about. It's like, where are you now? Where are you going? I mean, I actually heard something recently that depression is caused by a focus on the past. And I think that's brilliant. If you're looking forward, there's nothing to be depressed about, because everything can be incredible from here. So anyway, so let's talk about now and going forward. I wake up at 5 o'clock every day. So that I can go to 5:30 Daf Yomi, daven at 6:15, get home at 7 o'clock, 7:05, somewhere in there, so that I can help my wife get the kids out the door. So I wake up at 5 o'clock to be late for work at 9:15, just because there's so much to be done in the morning. And then there's a mincha minyan in my building that I 90% of the time do not make. I just daven in my office. And then I normally daven at home for Arvit as well. I'm not saying this that I should be proud of myself. This is not the ideal. The ideal is to be with minyan for every tefillah. And I wish I was learning more. So that's what I'm looking forward to, is figuring out how to increase that. Yes.
Josh from New York. What's your perspective on how Israel does, on the state of Israel does globally on the PR front? And assuming you think they could do better, what's the one thing that you would change? Okay,
it's actually the same question. It's a great question. And put simply, and I'm not saying this to you, Josh, I'm saying this to the world, it's the message, stupid. If you listen to Arab countries, whether it's the Arabs close to Israel's borders, some of the Arabs who live inside Israel's borders, Arabs all around the world, they all have one unified message, which is we need to end the occupation to have peace. Israel's PR situation is a classic 2 Jews, 3 opinions kind of scenario. You have leaders of the country who are in the coalition, who are in the ruling government of the country, with different messages about how peace is going to be reached, and we don't have a consistent message. So the problem is the message. The answer is the message. The issue is that it's not going to happen because of that whole 2 Jews, 3 opinions concept. We do very well when someone's attacking us. Then we get a unified message, which is, we have a right to exist. Outside of that, it's very difficult for us, and it always will be very difficult for us because it's really as simple as unified message. I can't tell you how many campaigns I've been made aware of, counseled on, strategized regarding that really just missed the point. Because as wonderful as the ideas are, as long as you have a defense minister saying one thing and a finance minister saying something completely different about what's proper for the future of Jerusalem, there's no hope for Israel's PR to be positive. Everyone around the world knows that Israel is amazing when it comes to technology, when it comes to tourism, when it comes to an army that is more humane than any other army in the world, when it comes to an army that is able to do things that armies that size are not able to do. That is another discussion. I encourage everyone to download some shiurim from Rabbi Ken Spiro from HaTorah. He talks about the reason for anti-Semitism, which, as you know, anti-Semitism and anti-Zionism are the same thing, where it all comes from, and it's much deeper than just a problem with Israel, but no matter how much money Israel spends on PR, it's not going to change a thing.
Yeah, so, this might be, sound a little stupid, but how far do you take your not, misleading? Because, technically, if you, don't like someone, but you smile and shake his hand, that's kind of misleading, even though, it's expected, even though, I'm saying, if someone comes in and you don't like his program, but you pretend to like his program,
Right.
Which I assume has to be done.
You ever heard of Reb Shlomo Carlebach?
Yeah.
Okay. So Reb Shlomo Carlebach, one time someone asked him, why do you have to dance every Friday night? Sometimes, you can't always be in the mood to dance Friday night. And he said, sometimes I dance because I want to dance. And sometimes I dance because I don't want to dance, and I hope that by dancing I'll want to dance. And I'll say the same thing. If the question of smiling at someone who maybe you don't like comes from a place of, maybe if I smile at this person, he'll smile back at me, and then maybe I'll like him a little more. Maybe just by smiling, I'll like him a little more. That's a good place to be. If there's something really fundamentally wrong, if there's someone who's, and unfortunately there are people who are just they're bad characters, then you just sort of steer clear and hope for them to change their ways. The same thing goes with companies. You hope that they'll right the ship. But you can never mislead. And when you smile at someone you don't like, it's not about misleading, it's about hoping for the best.
Right. So you would never accept a company who you feel is not doing something or is morally wrong?
Like a sketchy company? We would not work with a sketchy company.
Or something like that, or let's say a company, yeah, okay, fine, yeah, that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know he was touching on it, but isn't PR deception at its core? A little bit.
I think PR has a reputation for being deception at its core. I like to think of it as every company deserves to have its story told, so let's tell it truthfully, let's tell it loudly, and let's tell it clearly. I don't see a problem with that.
Right. No,
and like I said, sometimes I'm not as good at PR as some guys who are deceptive.
Right.
Okay, malasot.
I know you, but just for maybe one last point, maybe if you could just speak to the guys. The year in Israel is classically known as, where they're learning and they're involved all day. But what would you say to the guy who's working the 9-to-5 job, who's kind of lost meaning already or doesn't learn anymore or whatever, and then they have a moment of realization, wow, I'm not doing anything that I used to do or that I really want to do. What would you recommend they do when they have to continue with the coworkers and the job and everything seems to be repeating itself and staying the same? What steps could they take to kind of change that? Okay, so there are two steps that they're going to sound like a joke, but they're not a joke, and then we'll get to some other smaller scale steps. First step is to marry someone who's more religious than you are. You're all guys, so I can say that. If you were a woman, I would not say that, right? Because the whole thing about a woman having a sixth sense and all that other stuff, and woman's intuition, it is true.
They know where the family is supposed to go. Second thing is to have kids, which is the second sort of joke but not joke answer, because like I said earlier, when you have kids, they are brutally honest with you. They see through everything. They ultimately will follow your lead, and so if you want from kids, you got to be from yourself. For a while, I was not davening arvit. I was just tired, whatever. And I noticed that I now have 2 teenage boys who were not davening arvit, and I was like, hello, why do you think they're not doing it? Because you're not doing it. So I said, okay, enough of this, and I got back on the horse. So that's those are the first 2 things. Marry someone who's more religious than you are, and just appreciate the value of having children. But you're a few years from that. Another answer that I seem to see as relevant, based on some experiences I've had over the last 5-6 years, speaking to other yeshivas as well, is, and I don't even know if you guys offer this, but Shana Bet is relevant here. 1 year in Israel is enough to set you on the right course. 2 years in Israel, that's enough to make sure you're rocking and rolling. But that's up to each individual. So those are a couple of things. But I think the biggest thing really is to be honest with yourself and to ask yourself if you're being as good a Jew as you can be, and doing it on all the time. I can't emphasize that enough. I am now already thinking about some of the things that I've not done properly and how I'm going to answer to HaKadosh Baruch Hu during the Aseret Dmei Tshuva, right? Which were just a few months ago. I don't know what I'm going to do. I mean, whatever. I'm going to do what I do every year, which is just throw myself on the mercy of the court, right? And just say I'm not great. But the reason I'm able to even be at that point is taking an honest assessment of my life on a daily basis, and again, just trying to look forward. It's a little breast lift, but it's also a little Jewish. Yes, Max.
Yeah. Just out of curiosity, how did you meet your wife, especially if she was more religious and whatnot?
So my wife and my older sister were best friends from the age of 6. And we went to the same elementary school, my wife and I. And then we lost touch. I mean, I didn't really know her. She was just my sister's friend. Then when I finished university, I started working in New York. And my sister said, hey, you should call Gila. Maybe, you guys can be friends. And I called her. And we had a great conversation. And she kept telling me that I should date her sister. It was a little weird. But that was just, some sort of defense mechanism. And I'm sorry, this is not some crazy story, but that's how I met my wife.
That's a good story, it's fine. No worries.
Anything else?
Thank you.
Okay, thanks a lot, guys. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Oh, one last